Hello, I'm Scott Mason, president of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Athens, Georgia, and I have two really good guests with me today that you'll find very interesting. One is Vivian Preston-Sellers. Vivian is our vice president this year, and she headed up the group that developed the phases that we're going to be discussing right now. And the other guest is Lyndall Tunnell. Lyndall is also on the board of trustees, and Lyndall was in charge of developing our medical advisory panel, which we sometimes call the MAP, which is an appropriate name for them. Lyndall, what, when way back when all of this started, we developed the medical advisory panel. Uh, why and how did we do that?
Well, the board has a lot of really smart, hardworking people, and we struggled with it alone for a while. And then we realized we really needed to call in some more talent. And so we're very fortunate in that we have four people, either members of our fellowship or people in sympathy with our fellowship. And we were able to get them to form this panel to advise the board. And these are special people who have either worked their whole careers in medicine or are currently facing medical problems on a day-to-day basis. So they have a lot of insight, they know the lingo, they keep up with things. So we're very fortunate to have them advise us on an ongoing basis. I try to contact them before every board meeting and find out if we need to change anything or if they have any new ideas to present to the board. And this will be an ongoing thing for quite some time, I feel.
And but all of these people are from inside the congregation, right?
Well, three of the four are members, and one is, I guess I would call maybe a wannabe member someday.
Okay, very good. We accept all wannabe members, don't we? Vivian, your group developed the phases, and I wanted to ask you, what's the central concept for these opening phases?
Well, our two priorities were to keep the congregation healthy and to give the congregation some hope. So what we did was to try working with MAP to try to develop a series of phases to open slowly back up the fellowship building and grounds to members and friends. The phases were based on CDC's guidelines, adapted from school charts found on the CDC website. And we did some adapting. We actually flipped the chart backwards so that we started with the highest risk phase and went to the lowest risk phase.
Because they were looking at closing and we had already closed, so we're looking to
Right.
open. All right, so that's where the flip came in. And are we going to go both backward and forward, or is this sort of like once we reached a milestone, we move forward from there?
Well, it will all depend on public health data and the advice of the MAP. We are, Scott, if you can put up the chart, I'll show folks what we're using as our criteria for moving forward and potentially for moving backwards if we have to. We hope that all we will ever have to do is move forward in the phases with the ultimate goal of opening back up to everybody, the building and all the grounds. But there is going to be some time before we're able to do that. That's good. Scott, if you could bring up the chart, I can tell people about the 5 phases and what basic criteria we are using to move forward and backward. Phase 1 is the one that we are in now. It is the highest risk category. Phase 5 is the lowest risk. We're hoping to get there sometime in 2021. The two criteria that we are using based on CDC guidance and MAP advice is both criteria for cases per 100,000 over the last 14 days and the percentage of positive tests over the last 14 days. Both of those criteria must be met before we can move from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 to phase 4 to phase 5. We will also, if those two criteria if cases seem to be surging and we need some extra guidance, Scott, if you'll go down on the chart to the next page, there is a smaller chart right there of community conditions. MAP suggested, several of the members of the advisory panel suggested that we also take into account when things get really bad, the percentage of hospital beds, the percentage of intensive care beds, and the percentage of hospital beds with COVID patients. And all that information is available online about Region E hospitals. And we will be looking at that, as well as the Athens-Clarke County government's coronavirus page for the two criteria about the percentage of positive cases and the number of cases per 100,000. That was at the top of the chart. In the announcement that is on the homepage of the website, there is information as to how you as an individual can sign up to get information every week from Athens-Clarke County government as to those top two criteria. It's a real easy chart to read. You have to scroll down after you sign up to get the COVID-19 emails every week. You have to scroll down, but it's a real easy chart to read. And that's why we picked it.
And what changes in here phase by phase? What are the things that we can do as the phases move from left to right here?
Well, you will notice that now in phase 1, it's just 15 people are allowed at outside meetings and up to 15 for Sunday services. Basically, that's what happens now. As the conditions improve and we change from phase to phase, the numbers of people allowed at outside and inside meetings change. For example, in phase 2, when we move to that, people can start meeting indoors in the fellowship hall and the sanctuary for meetings. The number of people on Sundays that can be Sunday service presenters increases. You'll notice as we go across the phases, there are higher numbers of people, more events going on inside the building.
The real question that people are going to have is that set of numbers that reflects the worship services. We haven't dealt, if I recall correctly, we haven't dealt yet with how to lottery those out if we can.
No, the next thing that the board task force and MAP will be working on is guidelines for each phase, like we developed guidelines for phase 1. Many congregations of different denominations, not so many UU congregations, that are back to meeting in physical proximity to one another during worship, have various and sundry ways that we can look at for being fair in who gets to come on Sunday mornings.
Okay, so we can use the work that other congregations have done. We don't have to reinvent that wheel.
Correct.
Now that we have the vaccine, do we still need these phases?
Well, we don't have a vaccine. Not yet.
Promised a vaccine.
We have a promise of 2 vaccines, perhaps. But as with everything else with this COVID-19 pandemic, news changes daily. And we don't, especially with a change in administration in January, we don't know how that rollout of the vaccines is going to happen, how long it's going to take, when it's going to get to Athens, who's going to get inoculated first, who's going to get inoculated last. So there are many questions still. We will MAP and the board task force will continue to monitor what public health experts, Dr. Fauci and others, recommend in terms of when we can start rolling through phases more quickly. But the phases will stay in place until, for me, Dr. Fauci says, hey, y'all, it's okay to go back to church.
Yeah. And we continue to involve the MAP, the medical advisory people.
Oh, yes.
Medical advisory panel or people. They're all people. So we're going to involve them all the way through this shift of phases to be sure that we're on the right track here. When do we think that we will be back to normal? Vivian?
Well, I'm going to put that word normal in quotation marks because I don't think we're ever going to go back to the way things were in the congregation. The Worship Arts and Celebrations team has already made the decision that we will continue to live stream and record services so that people who are unable to physically be in the sanctuary can still participate in services even after Dr. Fauci says it's okay for us to be back in the sanctuary, so that if you have an illness or you've sprained your ankle or you just want to sit home in your robe with your cup of coffee on Sunday morning, you'll still be able to do that. So I don't think things are going to be the same as they were, especially since we are in the midst of an interim minister and her ministry and the search for a new minister.
Okay. Lyndall, how about you? Do you think we'll get back to a normal here?
I agree with Vivian. I don't think we're going to get back to normal in the sense that we'll be where we were before. My understanding is that even with a pretty good vaccine, we may change the situation from a pandemic to what they call an endemic, which means that the virus is probably always going to be with us. And there will be people who, for medical reasons, cannot take the vaccine. There may be others who just simply don't want to take the vaccine. So there will be those among us still unvaccinated. And so there's always going to be risk of people getting the virus even after the vaccine comes along. And so there may be, for those reasons, there may be people who choose not to come back to service, and the online version then will be real important to those people. So.
And just speaking in terms of personal habits, I used to think that it was a little odd to walk around with a face mask on, but not anymore. When I go out, especially in flu season, I think I'll probably be wearing a mask. Just not because of COVID-19, but just because there's a lot of other good stuff out there that people can get. So just our personal habits, I think, will change. So normal will shift here, no matter what. In 1 year, I think that we've come a long way in terms of how people look at public health. At least I hope we have.
Scott,
Yes.
can I make one more point?
Oh, sure.
That we didn't talk about? This is not a perfect document. This is not a static document. This is a very fluid and dynamic situation. And therefore, this document and the phases and the advice from the medical advisory panel may change over time. as things have changed over time throughout this pandemic. So please just be aware that we will continue to work. We know that many of you will be very disappointed that the building will not be opening back up until numbers come way down. Numbers are going up now instead of what we had hoped that they would come down. So just be aware that we will still continue to work on this. We miss being with everybody just as much as y'all do. And we will do whatever we can do to facilitate being back in the building as long as it is physically safe for folks to be there.
Okay. Very good words, Vivian. Very good words. I hope that all of you stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful week. Maybe even a great one.